In this tutorial, we're going to look at some patterns on walls created with brushes. Now, they're kind of irregular looking patterns. So let's zoom in here into the interior of the Toys R Us in Times Square. And we see this one wall back here. This one wall has all these little stars in a blue field there. Moving over across to this side, we see another set of walls that has stars and dots right there and here and back in here. We're going to look at those and how they were created. Now, I have here the actual files that made these things up. There's that wall where we saw the photo pickup. And there's various layers in here. So let's study those layers so we can see how this was built up. Of course, there are the paths that make it up. There's the paths that made up the actual sign and so on. There's little stars. Now, let's go look at the layers. Look at the background layer. The background layer is simply the gradient, going from this lilac down to this kind of a teal blue. Then there's a layer here that has the little blobs, all the little shapes that make up all those weird little designs on the wall. Then there's the layer with the dots, bunch of irregular dots. And there's some stars. And then we have the horizontal stripes, which have been given an inner shadow right in there to give them that feeling of being indented into the wall. And then we have three layers that make up the sign, which are those three here. We have the backing, which has some tones just to add a little shape to it. On top of that, we have the green backing. There we go. And then on top of that, we have the actual letters, which have been given a layer style of stroke and bubble and emboss to make them look like they do in the actual sign. And let's look at the starry wall, which is made up of quite a few different layers. The top layer is just a composite where I bring things in. Then there's the various layers with different colors of stars. So now, let's go in there and create this effect. Using my primitive tool right here, the one that allows me to create some bizarre shapes, that's the custom shape tool. I'm going to go in here and look at the shapes that are available. Now, there are those shapes right there, but there are additional shapes that ship with Photoshop that you can access. And right down here, there's one called Shapes. I'm going to say Append. In other words, don't get rid of these, just add the new batch to that. And there we can see that in Shapes, we have some stars. So I'm going to select that star right there. And I'm going to go in here and create the star. I'm holding down my Shift key to make sure it's nice and even. And I have it set as a path. And I'm going to go ahead and fill that path with a black. So I'm going to go in there and say, fill it. Now I select it, and I'm going to make that my brush. Define brush preset. And we'll call it star. Now I can throw it away. Don't need to see it anymore. And I have a layer that I've set up here. That's a blue layer, and I'm going to work in this layer right here. Now I got that little star. So I'm going to get my brush. I'm going to pick that star that I just created, which right now does that. So I'm going to go in there and start making it smaller, about that size right there. And in my brush panel, I'm going to go in and start giving it a lot of spacing. So now it starts to look more like that. I'm also going to go into my shape dynamics where I'm going to do a size jitter. Set up a minimum so they don't get too small. And an angle jitter so they're all going in different directions. I'm going to turn that off right there. So now it's starting to look more like this. And I'm going to go in there and do a little color dynamics. So that I can go between foregrounds and backgrounds like that. And I'm going to push the hue jitter all the way up. And I'm going to then scatter them as well. So they're going to go all different directions. See, just like that. So now when I go in there and start to draw, you can see I have that. Well, I'm going to add some colors in here. Let's add a little red. Let's say a bright red like that. And for this background here, we'll add a light blue. Let's go with a softer air like that. And I start to draw in there, and you can see that I'm getting all these additional colors because I have the hue pushed all the way up. Now, I wanted a little more control, so what I did is I lessened the amount of stars that were done, and I segregated them to single colors in separate layers. But here, just reducing the number of the count and pushing that hue all the way over, you can see that I got a nice little range of multiple different colors right there. Now, in the case of the other stars that were slightly bigger, let's go in here and let's turn off this background and let's just add a different color to this background here. We'll throw in this blue from our background. There we go. So now here we're going to just create some white stars. So we got the little brush, make it nice and big right there like that. And I'm going to go to my brushes panel where I'm going to bring this down I'm going to leave the scatter, but I'm going to increase the spacing between them so there's even more space between them. A lot of space. Let's go back to the color dynamics. Turn all that off. Everything off. There we go. No color dynamics at all. Just turn them off completely. All right, so now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to just draw a couple of little stars. Now, those stars that were in the image had a little black line around them. Now, since they're in a layer, I don't have to go in there and draw the black line around them. I could just go in there and go into my layer styles and say, give them a stroke. There's a little line right around them, which I can control the size, where the line is being drawn, and so on. But that's how those little lines were created. Now, the dot was the same kind of a thing. Let's go in there and create another layer for the little dots. But the dots require very little modification. All I do is take a brush, take the little round brush that's hard right there like that. Make sure that I have a lot of spacing between them. Go into my shape dynamics so that I have different sizes and such, and the scattering, and I go in there and draw my little dots right around them, and that's all it takes. Now the dots right now are in front of the brushes, but it is a layer, so I just put them behind the stars, and I can add a few more dots wherever I want, and there you can see how those particular brushes were modified or created, in the case of the stars, to create the effect that we saw in the walls in Toys R Us.